barnacling his knuckles, his own business in London nearly done. He was dressed like a gentleman, though he had lost his gloves, and he clutched his walking stick in one fist like a cudgel. A stain spotted his cuffs that might have been soot or mud, but was not either. He had been waiting for what passed for morning in this miserable winter, and paused now in a narrow alley, at the back of snowfields, opera hat collapsed in one hand, frost creaking in the timbers of the shop fronts, not sure it had come. Fog spilled over the cobblestones, foul and yellow and thick with coal fumes and a bitter stink that crusted the nostrils, scalded the back of the throat. That fog was everywhere, always, drifting through the streets and pulling apart, low to the ground, a living thing. Some nights it gave off a low hiss, like steam escaping a valve. 6 weeks ago he had come to this city to interrogate a woman who, last night, after a long pursuit across Blackfriars Bridge, had leaped the railing and vanished into the river. He thought of the darkness, the black water foaming outward, the slapping of the yard sergeant's boots on the granite setts. He could still feel the wet scrape of the bridge bollards against his wrists. She had been living lawful in this city as if to pass for respectable, and in this way absolve herself of a complicated life. But as with anything, it had not helped. She had been calling herself LaRoche, but her real name was Reckitt, and 10 years earlier she had been an associate of the notorious cracksman and thief Edward Shade. That man Shade was the one he really hunted, and until last night the Reckitt woman had been his one certain lead. She'd had small, sharp teeth, long white fingers, a voice low and vicious and lovely. The night faded, the streets began to fill. In the upper windows of the building across the street, a pale sky glinted, reflected the watery silhouettes below, the passing shadows of the early horses hauling their wagons, the huddled cloth caps and woolens of the outsides perched on their sacks, the iron-shod wheels chittering and squeaking in the cold. He coughed and lit a cigar and smoked in silence, his small, deep-set eyes predatory as any cutthroat's. After a time he ground the cigar under one heel and punched out his hat and put it on. He withdrew a revolver from his pocket and clicked it open, and dialed through its chambers for something to do, and when he could wait no longer, he hitched up one shoulder and started across. If asked, he would say he had never met a dead nail didn't want to go straight. He would say no man on the blob met his own shadow and did not flinch. He would run a hand along his unshaved jaw, and glower down at whatever reporter swayed in front of him, and mutter some unprintable blasphemy in flash dialect, and then he would lean over and casually rip that page from the reporter's ring-coil notebook. He would say lack of education is the beginning of the criminal underclass, and both rights and laws are failing the country. A man is worth more than a horse any day, though you would never guess it to see it. The cleverest Jake he'd ever met was a sharper, and the kindest Jill a whore, and the world takes all types. Only the soft-headed think a thing looks like what it is. In truth, he was about as square as a broken jaw, but then he'd never met a cop any different, so what was the problem, and whose business was it anyway? He did not go directly in, but slipped instead down a side alley. Creatures stirred in the papered windows as he passed. The alley was a river of muck, and he walked carefully. In openings in the wooden walls he glimpsed the small, crouched shapes of children, all bones and knees, half-dressed, their breath pluming out before them in the cold. They met his eyes boldly. The fog was thinner here, the stink more savage and bitter. He ducked under a gate to a narrow passage, descended a crooked wooden staircase, and entered a nondescript door on the left. In the sudden stillness he could hear the slosh of the river, thickening in the runoffs under the boards. The walls creaked like the hold of a ship. That rooming house smelled of old meat, of water-rotted wood. The lined wallpaper was thick with a sooty grime any cinderman might scrape with a blade for half a shilling. He was careful not to touch the railings as he made his way upstairs. On the 3rd floor he stepped out from the unlit stairwell and counted off 5 doors, and at the 6th he stopped. Out of the cold now his bruised knuckles had begun to ache. He did not knock.